Welcome everyone to episode 8 of The Way, a RUDIS Wrestling podcast with your host Cary Kolat and myself Matt Dernlan. Cary, how's it going?
Good, man. How you doing? How was the week this week?
Good. So you guys finished the regular season. You got a gap now. What are you? 2 weeks out now?
Yeah, we're a little less 10 days. 10 days out from our conference championships. Allocations come out tomorrow. So we'll see what kind of bids we get for each weight class and then training's good, guys. I've said it's probably the best team I've had since I got here. Guys are training well, mindsets, on point as much as could be. Training, they're wrestling hard. They're not in that end of the season mode where it's grinding me. They got the right mindset, so it's been good.
So how do you kind of structure and lay out like the next 2 weeks as you're heading up to? I don't want to get into the following 2 weeks before NCAAs, but what are you doing and what types of things are you focusing on?
Now it's been it's the drilling is the drilling is short. We're just drilling in fundamental positions, but really focusing on the motion and the level changes and the setup and things like that on our feet. But we've been really doing a lot of situational wrestling is what we've been into now. In on a high crotch, down by 3 with 45 seconds. So, you can't just, a takedown isn't enough. You got to score early and then you're going to have to score again. Time's getting shorter. So that's kind of the phase we're in right now. The last couple days, we're going 4 days in a row blocks, with the 5th day off. The last days singlets and matches, again, with some situations in there as well. And then they'll get a day off and you either lifting at night or conditioning at night. I've been wrestling at night as well, but doing, starter conditioning on the Aerodyne, back out, hitting shots on your partner, back on the Aerodyne, that kind of stuff. And it's pretty short. They've been on the mat, they're probably averaging on the mat 2 hours a day when it's just a mat day. But it's, you come in for a drill for an hour and you come back in for a live session for an hour, including the warm-up.
Yeah, I think this time of year, especially in college, kind of and talking about it kind of ties perfectly into this chapter a little bit. And the chapter, again, for everyone that's been following along, we are Cary and I are going through the book Switch with Dan and
Chip Heath.
Chip Heath. Sorry, thanks for picking me up there. And when I was going through this chapter and talking about how you tweak their environment, there's a lot of those things when it comes to training that are a bit different from high school to college, and getting guys to actually understand and the benefit of how those tweaks will integrate positively into their training and into their weight cuts and into their rest and recovery. I think there's a lot of foreign things to guys, new training situations and new conditioning practices, just across the board. Probably not major, but a lot of little tweaks that they were talking about in this chapter, and introducing those in a way where guys are receptive to it. Because typically, when you're getting these high school guys, and it seems like we've referenced this a number of times throughout the podcast, but a lot of kids are resistant to change because they've taken the last 10 or 15 years and been successful doing certain things over and over again. And so when you start, implementing your peaking phase where you're in and your guys are in right now, typically in high school, I always laughed about this. Like, the last month of the season is when everyone wants to train the hardest in high school, right? You got to
Yeah.
get 2 days in. You got to get that, extra conditioning after practice. You got to get this extra workout in. And so, I would always, I guess I had the benefit of my dad, who was coaching me, was probably ahead of the curve when it came to training in certain ways. But even at a younger age, I always kind of cracked up to myself when guys were like, "Yeah, I'm getting 3 workouts a day, the weakest states." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, what are you doing?" If you're not in shape by this time of the year, or if you've got to get in extra matches this time of year, something's been going wrong the last 3 months.
Yeah. And yeah, that's the big mistake. That's I'm glad you brought that up because the focus with our guys, and we've told them, is nothing changes, right? That's the mistake that happens at this point in the season, because and now you'll see guys get nervous. Now you'll see guys who should win bouts all of a sudden start to try to hang on when they should still be putting points on the board. And so our focus with our guys is, hey, nothing changes at the end of the year. We've gotten better each practice session. We've gotten better each week, and that's the mistake that the average wrestler is going to make now. He's going to say, well, now everything has to be better. And I always tell the story. I think I might have told you, said this story before, but Dean Morrison is a good example of a story I got from Craig Turnbull. It was the former head coach of West Virginia. Do you remember Dean Morrison at all, Matt?
Very well. Yes.
Yeah. So Dean was always going into the NCAA tournament and falling short. He had an unbelievable double, and every time he'd get to the NCAA tournament, he'd fall a little short. And he psychologically was not performing near what he should be performing. In his senior year, he won it, but a psychologist that Turnbull had brought in had stumbled on what his issue was, and he just thought when he got to the NCAA tournament that his double leg, which was unbelievable, needed to be faster. It needed to be set up better. He needed to drive more. Like all of a sudden, he was going to make all these changes to a double leg, which he had basically blown everybody off the mat with all season long. So at the end of the year, he'd put all this pressure on, thinking it wasn't good enough all of a sudden. When really your wrestling's been good all year. You're just continually getting better. And the guys who will crack, who will be like all of a sudden, like you're saying, I'm going to make changes. I remember coaching an athlete one time. He said, Coach, I've been doing really well. For the last 2 weeks, all I've drank is water. I'm cleaning my body. I'm like, why didn't you drink water all year long? Yeah. I mean, water isn't going to be the answer. The last 2 weeks of the season here, all of a sudden you're going to clean your lifestyle up. But yeah, that's exactly what should not happen. And your wrestling should be the same and be getting more perfect as the season goes on, just like any week. And mentally, you can't all of a sudden put all this pressure. And we say it all the time. We say it. And we've had this discussion where, well, when people lose, they love to go back to that because, well, nothing matters till March. Well, the truth is, it all matters. You want to win all the time, and I want to win in March as well. And that's really where your head should be, because when you start saying that, you're going to start building it up, and you're going to start trying to change your wrestling. When you don't change, do what's been working and keep tightening it up. And if you have the ability to add something when you get near the end of the season, add it. But if there's not enough time, you don't add it.
No, I think you're exactly right, and I think there's certain things that you have to get guys to buy in early on, that at the beginning of the year is like, hey, for us to have our peaking phase work perfectly, there's certain things that you have to do now for the next 44 months and really embrace and buy into for the peaking phase to actually pay off. Because if you're not, and by that I mean, buying into your right weight control, right? There's so many guys that, like, you, to your point, they wait till the last month of the season to try and tighten up their diet or get the right hydration or get the right rest. And I'm like, well, it's too late for that. If you haven't been doing this, hopefully you can condition yourself to kind of live a lifestyle year round. But especially in the 4 months of the season, if you're not managing your weight the correct way, if you're not resting the correct way, if you're not on top of your rehab and getting into the training room every day, and you try and turn your attention to those things in February, it's too late. Or at this point, it's March now. So, I know there's a couple things, and that's the biggest thing too, outside of, the peaking at the college level is much different than the high school level. And then the weight control is much different, and how you manage your weight is much different from high school to college. And I know I used to introduce a couple thoughts to guys that really threw them off. And the first one was, I'm like, hey guys, it's like, when we're getting down to weight, I was like, we're gonna drink our way down to weight. And guys were like, what? I was like, yeah, we're gonna drink our way down to your weight class. By that, we're gonna hydrate every day and get in a habit of we're drinking a gallon of water a day, to get your body functioning at an optimal level. And for a
Yeah.
lot of high school kids, that's a foreign concept, right? Because we're taught from a young age, it's like, you need to deprive, you need to cut out, you need to limit the stuff that you're putting in your body, when the reality is the opposite is true. You need to put more water in your body. You need to eat better and possibly eat a little bit more often than you would. But you just have to be diligent in doing those things a different way. But that takes a a, a while. Typically, in my experience, your whole freshman year to really figure out those things, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this chapter deals with, it talks about the situational environment that we need to consider, and what you were just talking about. For me, that's what the biggest part of this chapter was weight control. Because you get these guys who think, well, I've cut my weight this way and I've had success. That's the reason you recruited me. But you were wrestling high school kids, and there's a lot of bad fish in the sea. And now you're at the Division 1 level, and you're competing with, really, in essence, you're competing with, if there's, what are we at, 77 programs or 76? You're really competing. If you're the starter and there's 77 programs, you're competing against 76 other people that are left at the Division 1 level. And they didn't get there by accident. They got there doing something that put them there, and they're going to do it. Most of them are going to do it the right way. At least you're going to say that the top 10 are going to do it the right way, and that's when it's going to matter. And these kids in high school, I mean, they're using plastics, or they're using whatever means to lose weight, or cutting it last minute, and they can still succeed. And so for us, that's the big part. One of the things I always did, which was, again, like, giving clear direction, and changing the situation. When we first get guys, within the second week, we do a body fat test. We talk about the weight classes, and we chart it out. We weigh them in the first part of the year. We weigh them in every day. And we keep bringing them. Not every day. I don't like to beat a kid up mentally, but we have them on a flow chart that's bringing them down. And we say the same things. You're going to eat more, and you're going to drink more than you ever did to make weight. And then on top of that, we give them, rules on nutrition. One of the rules we have at the beginning is, we're not allowed to hang out in the cafeteria. You go there, you go up, you make your plate, you sit down, you eat. And I tell the guys, you can't be in the cafeteria more than 30 minutes. 30 minutes, you have to be out of there. Because you tend to sit there and socialize, and you're putting yourself in a situation where you're tempted to go back up. So remove the environment, get out of the situation. Um, and it's the same with the drinking water, like you were saying. Like, we had the guys on a diet plan where we forced them on Monday, they have to drink a gallon of water, and on Tuesday they have to drink a gallon of water. And your body only holds so much fluid. It's going to come out as soon as you start working out. You're just going to sweat profusely, and it comes out. And we got to get them accustomed to drinking more to make weight. And then the one things that really takes a freshman a long time to get used to is, if we have a 2 o'clock match, and we have to travel, at 8:30 we wake them up and everybody eats. We're not going to just lay in bed and try to float down to the weight. We get up, we eat. The plan is, we tell everybody, I don't want, if you're down the weight when we arrive with an 1 hour weigh in, then you did it wrong. We want everybody to be, depending on what you can cut in a good 45-minute workout, and that's on the mat rolling around. My big guys might be at 2.5, which scares me sometimes because I was a little guy. And then my lighter weights will be at 1.5 pounds. So they got up, they ate, they drank, then they went and work out, then they weigh in, and then they eat again, and they compete. And probably for this chapter, nutrition is what, if you're a coach listening, that's the biggest thing, is getting the kids to learn how to cut weight correctly, change their situations, put fluids in, and you have to teach them. One of the other guidelines that I gave, and these were just simple, tricks just for weight control. I wouldn't call it nutrition, but weight control. You can't sleep if you're a guy that has to make weight, and it's going to take some time for you to get your body shrunk down and shrunk down in a healthy manner. You can't wake up at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. And consume 2,500 calories, from, with the workouts you're doing, from 11. If you woke up at 10, from 11, and then you're going back to bed at 9, because you didn't give your body time to burn it off. You need to be up at 7:30. Breakfast is in you by 8:15. Right? And you consume that 2,500 calories over the course of hours of the day. When you're up, you're moving around, you're walking, you're talking. All that helps maintain your weight control. And there's little tricks, and that's changing your situation or changing your environment.
Yeah, exactly. And the hardest thing is, like, getting guys convinced, like, we're gonna do it the hard way early. And then if we embrace doing it the hard way, and I once they get in the pattern and the habit of embracing these new things, it becomes easier and easier as the year goes on. And it's just making sure you almost have to. You almost have to force them and introduce some of the things that you do with your guys, like time restrictions in the cafeteria, drinking a gallon of water, making sure you're checking your weight, every day and making sure you're in range. And, you know, if you can lock yourself in and do it the right way for the first 2 months, typically the last 2 months, which high school wrestlers or most wrestlers would say is their worst times making weight. A lot of times if you're doing it the right way, if you're eating the right way and drinking the right way, all of a sudden you're forced to actually eat and drink more later in the season because your weight starts getting too low. So and that's not a problem that a lot of high school kids have that, "Hey, coach, my weight's too low. What do I do? I gotta, you know, eat more." And I'm like, "Exactly. That means everything that we've been doing is paying off. So you feel your best, you're excited, you're feeling your best for the end of the year." And so, the other thing that I used to talk about with my guys when it comes to nutrition, I'm like, "Hey guys, we're done with the Snickers diet." And this was taken from a page out of my past. Like I was a Snickers guy and I loved I and I could tell you how much it weighed. It weighed 2.2 ounces. So to
Yeah,
me,
and
when I was in high school, I'm like, I'm gonna eat a Snickers. It only weighs 2.2 ounces. It tastes good. It kind of fills me up. And so I'm good to go. And there's so many kids in high school that employ the Snickers diet, right? And getting getting out of that Snickers mentality and into that high level nutritional training that you have to embrace, it just takes a while for guys.
yeah, yeah. I think everybody's had the Snickers diet at one point in their life. I think for me that was like middle school. I can't remember what I went into, but I remember having so many crazy cravings when I was cutting my weight incorrectly, But my last four years, I always tell my wife I blame it on her, but my last 4 years of competing, I was a vegetarian, and I made weight so much easier than I had ever made it before. I was always hydrated. I just wanted to change my entire lifestyle to make sure everything was correct. And the key thing you said earlier was habits, and that's the biggest thing is creating habits that allow you to make those change. And it's got to be something like I said earlier, just getting up earlier and starting to eat earlier means you have more time to burn what you put in your body. As a habit, getting out of the cafeteria within 30 minutes is a habit you need to start. Because we all tend to sit around and socialize around food, which is a problem for most people. But you have to make those changes, and as a coach, you have to make it easy. For me, it was posting signs in the locker room, what time to get up, what time you're going to eat, and I go back to our whiteboard in the practice room, just in the situation, like giving them a clear direction. Here's the practice plan for the day. Here's at what point it's probably going to end if things are going right, and then at that point you're on your own. Anytime you can lead somebody and they know, and it doesn't have to be big changes, just small little things can make a big impact on a guy's wrestling career or wrestling in that tournament or that event. And it's all going to be laid out. And if you can lay it out and remove that stress, it's going to really help them.
No doubt. Now, have you gotten to the point, Carrie, where it's actually you're are you having to do less of that now? Now that your program's established, you've been there for a handful of years. Do you have those philosophy and those tips? Are they being passed down by your
Yeah,
guys now more so than yourself or your staff?
yeah, my guys have done it. I've got it. This is my fifth year, so I have guys who've been in the program. My first set of recruits that I brought in are starting. They had senior night the other night, and all those guys really helped change my program. And that stuff has started to pass down. And my older guys definitely have better leadership in the room. But I find myself making mistakes. I get to the point where, like, okay, our team's better. We can do more training this way, and we can change things here, and we can start elevating the level. And then, if you don't have a checklist, things can fall through the crack. I think this year there were some areas, not with my starters, but with my non-starters and my young guys, where I didn't really go back and hammer the nutrition with them. And now I saw them all of a sudden. Oh, I'm struggling making weight, and so we've had to go back, at a later date and sit down with them and correct it. My backups hate it, and I'm sure they hate me every weigh-in day. But we tell them all the time that anybody could be hurt at any given time. I've had it happen twice, since being here. We get the conference and we got to yank a guy because of an injury, and somebody else has got to be ready to go. And so they get frustrated because I make them, they follow a weight chart to get down, even though they're not going to wrestle. You may wrestle, and we all know as a coach, that's a hard thing to keep a guy motivated when he's not going to compete and he's got to get close to weight. And I don't make him make flat weight, but I need him in range where if we stick him on the mat, they don't die if something happens to somebody. But I think anytime my guys are much better, my program's philosophy is much better, through the leadership of the older guys. And I think any mistakes that we make in those areas is probably it falls back on me, maybe not reinforcing, because I don't see a problem, and I didn't, and because I didn't see a problem, I didn't go and hit it before it started. And so this year I probably saw a little bit with nutrition.
Yeah, and I think that ties perfectly into the book, and what one of the main points of this chapter that Dan and Chip made was tweaking the environment is about making the right behavior a little bit easier and the wrong behavior a little bit harder. And all these things that we're talking about, I think in the short term, getting guys, you're changing their environment, right? The way they train, the way they condition, the way they eat, the way they manage their weight. It's changing their personal environment, right? Which in
Yeah,
the short term, when they see it and they're like, they look at this jug of water and they're like, "You got to be kidding me, coach! You're gonna make me drink this whole thing today?" It's like, I haven't, you know, and so initially changing their personal environment a little bit more difficult, but once it's getting them to the point, Cary, right, where they get their first taste of how they can see how the peripheral things affect the main thing, which is their wrestling performance, right?
right,
And it's amazing when those young guys for the first time, they get the right rest. They actually go and get a decent night's sleep. They manage their weight, they're eating right, they're sleeping right, they're resting right and recovering right. And all of a sudden, they have that performance and they walk off the mat and it's like, and they can see that it's like, yeah, coach, I see the effects. I see how this, the accumulation of doing these right things over and over and over again initially was a hardship for my environment, but now you're making my environment a lot easier. And therefore, I have obstacles removed out of my way. For
yeah,
for most kids, the obstacles are at the end of the year are of their own making, right? They
right,
haven't they haven't cut their weight right. They haven't rested. They haven't recovered right. They haven't trained the right way. And therefore, they've created obstacles unknowingly to themselves that it's too late for them to get out of the way. But if they can
right.
remove those obstacles early, all of a sudden their environment changes and it's like the clouds open up. Is like, holy cow, I didn't know you could feel this good in March because they've never felt that way before. I'm like, yeah, that's the point of it. So it's like getting them to the point where they actually can tangibly feel the difference in the little peripheral things that they've never focused on before up until college.
Yeah, yeah. And the big part of that is getting them to change the their mind to when they're going to see the effect, right? Like that's why people give up. People give up because they get tired, because all of us, I mean, if there is anybody that sits here and says that they don't like instant gratification is crazy. We all do, but the best minds in business, the best minds in sports, the best minds in coaching all know that instant gratification does not happen overnight. And we've trained ourselves or got ourselves thinking that it's going to take a long, there's a period in your mind when it's going to happen. But the average person can't do that. And so you've got to adjust the way they think. It's like the old rule with my son. I go back and forth with my son. He's 11 all the time, right? And you got me thinking. We're sitting here because he was doing push-ups. He was proud of himself every night before bed. Push-ups, sit-ups, squats. I'm like, that's great, buddy. Keep it up. And I told him to just do 10, 10, 10, right? He's like, well, I'm going to do 30, 30, 30. And I knew what was going to happen. Eventually he'd get fatigued and he'd wear out and he'd stop doing them. And now he's back to where he's had this gap, 2 weeks he hasn't done them before bed. And that's why I set the bar low at the beginning. Let's just do 10. And then I was going to take him up to 11 and 12 and slowly increase him and work him up. But he couldn't hold back and he wanted it now. And because of that, he mentally started to wear himself out. And so now I got to start him all back over. But it's like, any guy that comes into his career, what I always tell them is, look, I don't need you coming in here right now. We all want to win, but here's where I really want your mind to be. How good can I be over a 5-year period, right? With your red shirt in line, and 4 years of wrestling. How good are you going to be at the end of 5 years? And that's where the thinking's got to be, that constant progression. And obviously, if you get a different guy, you might be pushing in a year. It just depends on what type of person you're working with at the time. But that's how I always had my thought process was always, how good am I going to be when I'm finally done wrestling? And so I try to get my guys thinking the same way. And that way, when you hit these stumbling blocks, you're not burnt out by it, and you don't fatigue so early, because you're adjusting them for the longevity of the sport, because it takes a long time to perfect it and to get everything right, to get eating right, sleeping right, social relationships right, training right. It takes a while to really get all that stuff in sync. We're not sitting here running into a ton of multiple NCAA champions out there all the time, right? Most people are going to win. The good ones are going to win one NCAA title in their career for the most part. That's probably that's the average for the most part. And so it takes those guys typically 4 to 5 years of getting everything in sync and getting it right to walk in there on that day and put the right tournament together. And some of that can be just the environment itself, the tournament itself.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of one of the points they were making in this chapter as well, that when a lot of times most people discover when it comes to their own behavior, environmental tweaks a lot of times beat the self-control or self-disciplines that we try and infuse into our lives every time. Um, like case in point with your son, um, that was a self-discipline thing, right?
Right.
He set an ambitious goal, which is great, which is admirable, but he wasn't prepared environmentally to do that over a sustained period of time. So it's like you've got to do things with your environment and set up a structure. He's not shortcutting himself by saying, "No, I'm going to do 10, 10, 10." It's just, and I'll build up eventually to 30s, right? But
Right.
I need to understand where I'm at environmentally and, conditionally. And if I just start up and control myself in a certain way, when I get to 30, it's going to be even more rewarding and more exciting. And I think that's to your point with guys, when it comes to their development, they don't understand consistency is the key, right?
Yeah.
Every year after the national tournament, you probably have every guy on your team ready to go out like gangbusters for the month of April and become a national champ, right? Um, and you see that everywhere. Every year, people they don't reach their goals. They fall short of what they were striving for, and so they have this short term burst of energy and like I'm going to do everything right now, and that's impossible, right? If you
Yeah.
if you've never done everything right over a prolonged period of time and all of a sudden you're starting to say, I'm going to do everything right. You're just setting yourself up for failure. So a lot of it is consistency is the key. Consistency in, just keeping your weight in check for the entire year instead of yeah, and I don't think this is as prevalent now because guys are doing much better. We're much more educated with how to manage your weight, what to eat, what to drink. So you don't see those guys ballooning up to 30, 40 pounds over in the off season. You
Right.
see more guys that are within 10 to 15 pounds. And so they're like, so when they get to September, it's like, yeah, I'm only 15 over as opposed to like, ah man, I'm 40 pounds over. How am I gonna and it goes with everything across the board. It's like consistency in doing the right things over and over again over a prolonged period of time is how you're really going to change your environment and how to fundamentally change yourself.
Yeah, you said April. April drives me crazy. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I'll tell you why. When I was a younger coach, I used to sit back and we'd be wrestling in the summer. I'd be like, man, we look really good. Like, no, we're going to be awesome this year. But the thing about April is when everybody's eating a lot, right? You're not really cutting weight. But the other thing is there's no stress. There's right there, maybe they're taking a class in summer school or in April and May, and there's no stress. And that's always saying, why don't you wrestle like you do in the summer? Like you wrestle carefree, you wrestle without hesitation. Your mind is open, your mind's relaxed, and that's the way you're supposed to wrestle all the time. But man, as soon as it's singlet time, you're going to see the like I said, the average thinkers start to appear because now all of a sudden it's serious. It was serious when we were in the practice room in May. Like there was no different. But that's a habit of every program across the country that guys will do their best wrestling in the summer. It always drove me crazy when I was younger, and I learned when I got more into coaching, and I knew I wanted to be a head coach someday. That don't let April fool you or May fool you because like you got to drive it out of them, make sure their mind is just as open. Like they all perform in the summertime and they're all eager to wrestle and learn and train. But that's the way it's got to, that's the habit you have to have year round. Like my son's habit is it's got to be consistent. It's got to happen every day, just like you go in and you do the reps every day. We never stop drilling the high C, the double, the single, and the pull and spin. You never get away from those. They're always going to be your bread and butters that are constantly being perfected. And it's the consistency has always been the key word. And you ask anybody, it's any great at anything. It's consistent habits is what does it. There's very few gifted athletes in the world. Let's maybe make up 5% who can roll out of bed and still be sharp. For the 95% of the people, that's an anomaly. You're going to have a routine that gives you the mindset and the motivation and the energy level to go out and perform when it's time to perform. And that's where it's got to be. And environment is big. It's funny though. In this chapter does deal with environment. Looking at the situation, looking at the environment. Like I'll be honest, man. Like we had an adequate room before. We had 2 mats at Campbell. It was everything that we needed. Minus we didn't have our own cardio room where it was more convenient to go, right? So my guys are in better shape this year because it really is more convenient for them to go in and hit the Aerodyne bike and jump on 3 treadmills or jump on, we got 20 bikes in there or the room's long enough to do sprints. Really, honestly, I'd be lying if I didn't say that room helped, and it did.
Well, even
Now,
even probably from a live wrestling situation, right? Like subconsciously, when you're in a smaller room, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about the guys around you, right? Like, am I going to get rolled up on? Am I going to run into somebody? And now all of a sudden, just from a wrestling standpoint, these guys have the freedom to like, yeah, I don't have to think as much about who's around me or what potentially bad could happen. So even from a training situation, they have more freedom to wrestle the way they normally would.
yeah, more space, definitely. Yes, we have more open room than we have ever had. Hey, and before it wasn't a place that you came when you were injured and you couldn't do anything, that you came and really watched because there really wasn't space. My guys now even, and I don't think if I got a guy who's always on top of his stuff and he gets an injury, I don't make him sit in the chairs and come and watch. I don't say show up at 2 o'clock and I'm like, go get your homework done, focus on your weight, do what you can do. But they come and they sit in the chairs and they watch, man. They love to be there all the time. And, changing that room definitely changed. My guys say all the time, Coach, I could never go back, and I'm like, I couldn't either, man. So like, but it does. And that's a simple environmental change that has spruced things up.
Yeah, I mean, people probably don't give it as much credit as they should, but it's a lot more enjoyable to train when you enjoy the place you're in, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
that room is not gonna make you a national champion, right? But having a peace of mind when you enter that room and saying, "I enjoy being in here." I know it sounds a little, you know, a little cheesy, but there's there's some truth to that. Like, if
Yeah.
you enjoy the place where you go to work every day, you're gonna be more productive. It's simple math, right?
Yeah.
Happy mind makes gives produces a good attitude produces good performance, good effort throughout the day, and so just walking into a place and an environment where like, "Yeah, this is great. I enjoy being in here every day."
Yeah, and back to environment. If you're, I'll leave you with this last point before we cut off here. Is back to environment with these RTCs. Before all these college programs, everybody had a wall, right? We had this wall, like everybody was the enemy. And now with these RTCs in the summer, my guys will go to NC State and work out. I've had guys go to other places and work out. And changing that environment is I always change my. I loved going other places. I loved getting out of my room. I didn't want to look at the same walls all the time. That was important to me. But if you're a coach, a high school coach, like these team camps. I mean, everybody goes to team camp, and you know right there, you go there for the reason of people become more competitive than just a regular camp. When you can take your team and say, hey, we're going to go as a group, and we're going to go train with a team that we're going to wrestle next year. Like, you're going to face them anyway. Like, trying to hide in your own little box doesn't. Get in there and mix it up, because everybody naturally picks it up a notch, you know. And when we go to RTCs, I don't really do coaching. If we're going somewhere else, I kind of let them watch because I want to see them perform. And they perform better because now we're in another room. They're wrestling different guys. They don't want to lose. And, the competitiveness comes up compared to training with the same guy, 8 months a year, and so in getting out of your own room and going to a different environment is very important. If you're trying to be a great coach and really change your team, like, do it. If you can get them somewhere, do it. Don't be afraid to go to your competitor's room in summertime and get workouts in and mix it up. Yeah, like, the cream rises to the top. The best guys, and if you get your butt kicked in the summer, well, that's the best time to get your butt kicked, because now you got a chance to see this is where we're making mistakes and this is where we can fix it. And you got to put yourself in those challenges, and you got to let your guys see that every opportunity you get to change their environment and put them in a challenge that's going to make them better, that they know as your coach that you don't run from a challenge for your program, whether you go, and you got to go into the ones where you, even if you don't think you can win, you still got to get in there, because you may not win the first few times, but eventually you're going to win because you keep putting yourself into it. And guys can respect that, and that can change your team, seeing them how you approach it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think a lot of times, as much as we're educating our athletes and talking about what's possible, right? The way you're training is the way you're training, and everything you're doing in the room every day is training these guys to be national champs. And but from a perceptual standpoint, when you put them in different environments, they deconstruct all the things that they build up with other programs, right? Because it's out there. As much as you're talking to your guys every day about, we're doing exactly the same thing, and probably we're doing it better than even some of the best teams in the country. But perceptually, they have these things about the bigger programs or the high profile programs, like they're doing something different, or they're doing something, you know, they've got a magic formula. And you put these guys in these RTCs, or you take them out to the training center in Colorado Springs, and all of a sudden they walk out of there like, wait, they're doing exactly what we're doing. Actually, we're doing it better, coach.
Right.
And so perceptually changing your environment, to perceptually change your environment, you have to go elsewhere. You have to seek out different challenges and embrace new opportunities against different people. And when you can perceptually change your environment, it's much better. It's easier to accomplish big things within your program.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think, man?
I I
How's
think
this
it'll be
week going to
good.
be?
I think it's gonna be great. Excited for you guys. Excited for your postseason. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure the guys are chomping at the bit. You're probably trying to figure out ways to keep them in the moment, right?
Yeah, not as much. Like I
That's
said,
good.
this is we've gotten better mentally every year, and no, not as much as that I've done in the years past with where we started at. We're getting the right guys. I mean, I know my freshmen now, are really going to see the benefits. I can't wait to see how these guys progress and move 5 years from now. Where they're at mentally, but anyway, well, I enjoyed it, man. It was another good talk, Matt. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Cary, and look forward to watching you guys in the postseason, and excited for the month ahead for you.
I appreciate it, man. Well, have a good week.
Okay, take care, Cary.